Hi, I'm Neil Bergman.
And I'm Hayley Bergman. Over the last 10 years, we've helped thousands of fitness professionals to get qualified, learn with simplicity, and coach clients with confidence.
We're the first to say that learning and being a FITPRO doesn't have to be hard work, and that with the right structure, support and resources, you can become a confident and knowledgeable fitness professional that is dedicated to more.
So how do you learn, qualify and kickstart as a FITPRO? This is the FITPRO Session Podcast with Parallel Coaching.
A FITPRO Guide to Neuro Linguistic Programming, otherwise known as NLP.
Otherwise known as Season 8, Episode 8 of 8, maybe 10.
Maybe 10. So we will extend this Season 8 for FITPRO Sessions by a couple more episodes because there's so much more we want to say and get in and talk about, and the feedback from you guys has been phenomenal. So,
and that everyone's really enjoyed learning about behaviour change in depth as well, and like the detail on each of the episodes we go into. And today's no exception in terms of learning about NLP.
NLP, which I think is a real nice logical progression from the first 7 episodes. So the context of behaviour change, the trans-theoretical model, we've discussed the self-efficacy theory, decisional balancing.
Communication skills, motivators of change.
Completely.
And last week's was cognitive behavioural therapy.
And I think everything so far in the first 7 episodes, which is, near on 7 hours of behaviour change now, leads nicely to today's, which is Neuro-Linguistic Programming.
Yes.
So with kind of no further ado, what is NLP, Hayley?
Well, first of all, before we even go any further, I want to explain that this is our perception.
That's a great point, yes.
Of what NLP is. And this is probably like my perception of it, and a quote that I really like is that NLP is not about truth or false, or it's not about knowing what's true and what's false. It's about a specific outcome being achieved, so the client's outcome that they can achieve.
Yeah.
And then what I like about that in terms of bringing that into the definition of what NLP is that I'm not going to give you a specific clear, this is the truth and that's all it is.
Perfect.
Because this is our view and our opinion of what it is.
Which is NLP in a nutshell, isn't it? Completely.
Yes,
so,
exactly. It's our map of the world in that.
So before we go into the definitions of NLP, this isn't a definitive outcome of what NLP is known to be true as.
Yeah.
It's our perception of what NLP is. And that is the definition of NLP. Exactly. I know that sounds a bit of like a Jack Sparrow tongue-twisted comment, but Hayley just mentioned something called this map of the world, and we're going to talk about this very shortly. But imagine you've got a map. Imagine you've got an OS map of your local area, and just pinpoint where you are on that map.
Yeah.
Okay, so you put a dot in and say, right, I'm here. And as you look around your road or your street or your immediate surroundings, there's only so far the eye can see.
Yeah.
And so it's our perception of what we can see right now and our interpretation of what we can see on that part of the map.
Yes.
Now, we know that the map is bigger. We know that there's more territory.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, nice.
But we don't know, we can't see it, we can't taste it, we don't have any senses around that.
Nice.
And so NLP is our exploration to the wider map, if that makes sense. But it's really only our perception of what is on that map. So I could look at my immediate surroundings and interpret it in one way, and you could be standing in the very same spot and interpret in a totally different way.
Yes.
So it's at this episode is our approach to standing in a very particular part of the NLP map.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you've done NLP before, you might go, well, actually, that was not how I interpreted it. Okay. That doesn't mean it's not true.
This is where it gets really, really interesting, and
Yes.
I love that. So let's explore the actual definitions associated to NLP so that you could get some context
So
to
you've
draw
got
upon
3
it.
words.
Yes.
First word, Hayley, neuro.
Neuro is basically relating to our nervous processes, so how we filter sensory information. Our 5 senses, our sight, our smell, our touch, and our hearing and our taste.
Hayley's desperately looking down the notes going, what are our 5 senses? Neil, please help me.
I should know that. It's like primary school level, isn't it?
Yeah, so you've got neuro, then you've got linguistic.
Yeah, which is all about language and how we communicate with others or communicate the senses that we've just interpreted. So that could be how we draw it, how we talk about it, how we express our feelings, how we behave, how we do self-talk.
So that could even be in music, that could be in art, that could not just verbal like this.
Yeah, exactly.
So when we
and
look
then the
at...
final bit is programming, which is about how we communicate with ourselves and with others using that information. So so I think a nice example of that, like an example I really like, is if we take all 5 senses. Let's just say I've got a bunch of flowers like right in front of me.
This goes back to the map of the world and our perception, which is our programming. Okay, so what we're really talking about here, I suppose, is our deep-rooted beliefs and our values and what we prioritize and how we interpret information and what we believe to be true but might not be true.
Yeah.
And then we have a thought, which leads on really nicely from last week of CBT. We have a thought, which leads to an emotion, which leads to a behaviour, which leads to a response.
Yes.
There we go.
Of course. So if I have a bunch of flowers and I can smell those flowers, I can see those flowers, I've kind of got the wind whispering past my skin, whatever it might be, and I'm holding those flowers, I might have the thought of like, what a lovely day.
Now I could pick up the same bunch of flowers, have all of the same senses. I could smell the flowers, the wind whistling past my skin, okay? But I could go, isn't it a shame that somebody picked these flowers? The flowers are dying.
Nice. So the thought, so there's a situation, turns into a thought,
Yeah.
turns into the emotion that
Yes.
goes with it and the expression. So it's very similar to what we had as the process of cognitive behavioural therapy.
Yeah.
Last episode, where we were saying
Yes.
that it's the situation, the thought,
Completely.
the emotion, the behaviours.
Now you've got neuro, you've got linguist, and you've got programming.
Yes.
Now let's just go back to the roots of where this kind of originated from. So we're going right back to the early 70s with two kind of key influential characters known as Richard Bandler and
John Grindler.
Okay?
Yeah, and they were in the 1970s, and they basically looked for a technique that would identify language patterns to identify complex cognitive processes.
Now here was the beauty of it, is because one of them was a linguist, so we're talking about language, and one was a mathematician and scientist. So when you put those two worlds together and you collide these two worlds together, you've got one that's talking kind of, let's just take the language side of things, the interpretation of language, kind of you could have the chunking down or chunking up. And we've talked about this in the previous FITPRO session inside Behaviour Change, of like the very specifics. And I think we had it was all about motivators. It was episode 6,
motivators of change.
where we said, right, so we have a car on the level playing field, and we could chunk that down and say, well, the car has 4 wheels, the car has a steering wheel. Or we could chunk up language and say that the car gives us freedom. The car,
Meta and Milton, wasn't it?
completely.
Yeah.
And so you've got one person exploring language,
Yeah.
okay, and then you've got another person that's very much looking at the data, very much looking at patterns, very much looking at the facts, and saying, right, if we see this pattern of language and this pattern of behaviour and we put those together, can we predict what's going to happen?
And can we identify the cognitive processes that come before it as a trend?
Yes, completely,
Which
because
is really interesting.
we aren't our thoughts, but this notion is if we can think about the outcome we want, or to identify with the outcome we want, then that will lead to a particular set of thoughts, and therefore our thoughts, as we know from last week, create a set of emotions, create a behaviour, create a response. So if we want to create a very particular response in whatever we're doing, then we've got to, I suppose, reverse engineer that back to the thought process and identify with the thought of who we want to become.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a deep one, isn't it, already?
I like it. But what I like about that is that you said it's about identifying with a thought of who you want to become. And one of the key things about NLP is that it's outcome focused. It's
Yes.
all about the end result. So you're always thinking about who you want to become. You're not digging into the past.
Yeah.
It's not even necessarily about what's happened now. It's about basically unpicking what your language is and focusing on the future of what it is you want to achieve,
Yeah.
which I find really interesting. And there's a set model for NLP. Do you want me to go through that now?
I think
in
it's a
terms
good
of
place.
How it gives
Yeah.
context.
I
to
just
how
like
it
this
fits
concept
together.
of like that, you know, Tony Robbins. I think Tony Robbins is obviously like a big, certainly through the 80s, 90s, and for this, you know, like first 20 years of this century, has been a key factor around kind of NLP and that style of coaching, that strategy of coaching. And one of the things he talks about a lot is success leaves clues. And really, if we break what we just said down, is it's about like who's achieved what I want to do, okay? And can I break down their language, their thought processes that led to a very particular outcome and behaviour? And can I model myself on that?
I like that.
Because
that's good. Well, that's shortcuts. That's the success leaves the clues
yeah,
to
and when
know
you break
what
down
success
NLP,
you
we're going
want.
to talk a lot about modelling today. There we go.
Of course.
And that's really what we're saying is we aren't our thoughts. We've said that before, okay? But if we can program our thoughts that lead to a very particular destination on the map,
nice,
then we can predict what we're going to do or get.
Good. Okay. Cool. Nice.
So this leads into...
So yeah, this understanding of NLP, I like the idea of it being this kind of column-based coliseum as such. So if you think about on the foundations, it all starts with having curiosity, and that becomes the first, like the platform, the foundations. So if we can start by being curious about our cognitive processes, about our language, about how we behave, that becomes an understanding, and curious about our clients and how they talk, think, and behave, that basically sets us up for the foundations of NLP. So it all starts with curiosity. And then imagine there's 4 pillars, and these 4 pillars basically lead up to a roof on top. So the 4 pillars...
So like I think if you said the word Colosseum already?
Yes.
Yeah, so like
Colosseum.
the classic kind of Greek Colosseum.
Yeah, cool. Nice. So you've got rapport as the first pillar. So you need to have rapport with your client in order to open everything out.
Which was discussed in episode 1 of season 8, which was discussed in the transferential model, which was discussed
communication,
which was discussed heavily inside self-efficacy theory with Bandler, which was discussed inside cognitive behaviour therapy, with rapport being the leading factor.
Yeah, and if you don't have rapport with your client, then you're not going to be able to facilitate that change and help them elicit change. The next part is sensory acuity, so that you as the FITPRO, as the coach, can be really aware of all of your senses, but asking your client to also be really aware of their senses. And it becomes a really key pillar so that you can be aware of like how your client's reacting or responding to a certain thing you might be talking about, but you're also asking them to dive deep and be aware of what they're sensing.
Completely. And obviously... I think from my experience as a FITPRO, the main sensory acuity has been the verbal side of things. But now we could be looking at the disconnect as saying, like, I said a certain word, or I said it in a certain way, they said it in a certain way, or whatever. And what response did that give to a non-verbal? But also being acutely aware of my sensory acuity, because they might say something or say it in a certain way or move in a certain way, which could also have an impact on my language.
Yeah. And this reminds me of like when I was learning NLP, I remember understanding like things to look out for, like eye movements. Like if they look left, it might suggest more of this one. If they look more right, it might suggest more of this one. Do they have a very solid eye contact in the middle? And also that understanding of mirroring as well. And I remember both of those relates to that.
What we've got to remember is it's a free podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. At the end of the day, it's only 50 minutes to an hour 10. Thereabouts, okay? It's not the definitive, like, everything about NLP. And we've already mentioned lots of things, such as, like, eye contact, where do the eyes move, sensory acuity, non-verbal body language. There's lots of things that make up NLP. And I just want to kind of stress again today, we aren't covering an entire NLP master practitioner course inside 50 minutes.
What's really nice is that if you come across these terms and you want to know more, then it's a great kind of taster board for all these different
That's what we said last week, wasn't it? Like
terms.
Each one of these episodes is kind of like the world buffet of well, actually, I could the world buffet of behaviour change. I really would like to do more in NLP. I'd really like to do more in self-efficacy, and it leads you, maybe just hopefully it's that ignition, that start to go down the rabbit hole.
I like that. Third pillar,
yes, as we move,
is outcome orientation, which we said already, how important it is to be goal focused about what it is that they want or that your client is looking for. So it all comes to the goals. And then that was episode 6 where we looked at goal.
Well, yeah, because are they moving towards pleasure or away from pain?
Yeah.
And if we look at success leaves clues, and we look at the people we might want to model, I'm going to say it's going to be very biased to somebody that is towards a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not away from pain.
Perfect.
Maybe, I don't know. That's just my map.
Because we've done motivators and we've done SMART goals, I think that stacks up really nice. When we say outcome focused, you probably understand exactly what we mean.
What do they want? When do they want it by? And why do they want it? That's the key, is that the why.
Yeah, exactly. And
so
then
the fourth pillar
is about behavioural flexibility. Understanding, this is quite a phrasing,
this
isn't it?
is the
Understanding that with that curiosity that was at the foundation, to understand that your client might behave in a certain way that reflects their values, their map of the world, and understand.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. And to approach that without any judgment, which is in line with the rapport pillar. So they all kind of map together. Now, all these pillars that you have then stack up to a roof on top of this pillar. So again, imagine this Colosseum. And the roof of it is the 14 presuppositions, which we are going to go into.
We are going to explore the 14 presuppositions, and again, it's just like one part of a map. Or
just
one
one
part of the territory to explore. And I think it's a really nice place as an introduction to NLP is to explore these 14 presuppositions.
Yeah.
I really like that last fourth pillar, which was behavioural flexibility. Because we have to be, as FITPROs, flexible in our approach. And it goes back to episode 1, which is about the yellow brick road, where I said, I've got lots of yellow bricks. They all lead to your destination.
Yeah, I've got that.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and depending on your answer, I'm going to give you a yellow brick. Now, I've got lots of yellow bricks that I could give you. Let's just go down the exercise route. I could give you a frequency brick, an intensity brick, a type brick, or a time brick. Now, depending on the answer you give will determine what brick I give you, but just know that it's going to be yellow, and we're only going to head towards Rome, towards the Colosseum.
Yay!
Yeah. And I've got to be flexible, and rather than having, okay, I've only got intensity bricks.
Yeah.
Okay, and so as a FITPRO, we must be able to be, the more flexible we are, I think that allows us to have more sensory acuity. And the more flexible and sensory acuity, remember that was Colosseum number 2 and the pillar number 4, rather.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that allows me to build more rapport. And now I've got number 1, and number 3 was
the outcome.
The outcome. Now I'm only focused on giving you yellow bricks towards Rome, towards this Colosseum. Now, the more I can stack up those 4 pillars, I keep getting my words
bricks
mixed
and
up.
pillars,
bricks and pillars, blah blah blah. I can now have more curiosity, and the curiosity is your 3, 5, 7, 10 questions deep.
Yay!
Okay.
I love how all this is coming together.
Completely.
I'm glad we left NLP to be after we've stacked all these principles underneath.
And notice that if we want more curiosity, going back to another analogy we had in I think episode 2, was we said that if we were to build a house or build a Colosseum, we would want very strong foundations. Now, the stronger the foundation, the taller the pillars can be.
Yeah,
so if I want to go deeper on curiosity, okay, I've got to be able to ask world-class questions with these 14 presuppositions in mind, okay, which means I get solid curiosity, which means I get solid rapport, solid pillar number 2, solid pillar number 3, solid pillar number 4, and the more solid that is, the roof is solid as well.
I think that's amazing. What I like about this from a FITPRO point of view is just the single question you could ask yourself now of like, how could I become, or where in my practice would I be more curious? So how could, like, there's so much that we're going to give you that you might get like overwhelmed with content, basically, of these 14 presuppositions. Or what do I change first? Yeah, exactly. That's a good thing. But what do I change first, or what do I look at first? So I would say the first thing is that foundation. Where could I be more curious?
What questions could I ask to my clients to be more curious?
And if we just take a conventional, let's just say a PT, running a boot camp outside, and they basically, all they see their clients is for the actual exercise sessions. They don't necessarily have any much chat in between or any accountability. Immediately, as soon as you say, where do I become more curious? You might put a consultation in beforehand. You might do a question and answer session. Yeah. You might do, like, the accountability starts to expand, doesn't it?
Yeah, completely.
I love that.
Because the question would be, if you only see him for, let's say, 3 bootcamp sessions a week, you could say, well, I'm curious, what do you all have for breakfast? I'm curious, what do you all do for lunches? I'm curious, what do you do on a Friday night? And suddenly you're building rapport. You've got higher sensory acuity. You are working on the outcome, and you're being flexible in your approach, which leads to these 14 presuppositions. So presupposition number 1, I'm going to read. In fact, I'm going to ask Hayley to read, because I'm not good at reading out loud, if that makes sense.
Number 1 is RESPECT.
Right. I didn't expect that one, which is respect the other person's model of the world.
Yeah, so let's just funk that up. We'll have a little song.
Completely.
If you're singing now, I want to know.
Yeah, completely. So presupposition number 1 is respect the other person's map of the world.
Yeah, and this is that understand. That's in line with the rapport. It's in line with what we said about behavioural flexibility and the fact that you're basically understanding what Neale said about the map. The territory that you're in might be the same, but I might look at it in a different way to what
we all have different beliefs. We all have different values. We've all had different upbringings. We've experienced different teachers at school, different role models in our world. We've all experienced a different approach to the world as we know it.
Yeah.
So something I was reading earlier is like, there is no reality. It's only someone's. There's no objective reality. It's only someone's subjective opinion of what they perceive reality to be.
Nice. Okay.
Bit deep, but your beliefs, your values are going to be different to mine. So it's respecting that actually everybody is where they are right now, and that's okay. And yes, they might have been a bit of a pickle. Not literally, okay, but with regards to their health, they might be in a bit of a pickle with regards to their weight. They might just be stuck with a particular problem. They might not be able to get past a particular PB in their running, but they have a set of beliefs that have got them to where they are right now, okay, and it's through understanding these presuppositions and that first one of respect, which builds even more rapport, and I can't build rapport without sensory acuity. Knowing that actually we're heading towards a particular goal. So my line of questioning and line of curiosity is always going to be heading towards the goal, but respecting where they are right now and not judging them, not discrediting them, not I'm only looking to better them.
Yeah, nice.
Okay.
You know what this bit reminds me of is if I asked you to draw a picture of your street that you live on now.
Yes.
Your street is the same. That's not any different. That's the same situation, right? But you might draw it one way. Your 5-year-old daughter might draw it an entirely different way.
Yeah, completely.
And neither are right or wrong. They are all just somebody's map of their world. It's somebody's model of their world.
And how they present that information that's where sensory acuity comes in of the 5 senses is our interpretation, and it goes back to what we talked about in the transferential model. No, in one of them about communication.
Yeah.
Where if we don't fully understand something, I can paraphrase it back and I can summarize back to gain confirmation that that's what they meant.
Yes.
Because I could say to everybody in your road where you live right now and say, tell me what you love about living here. Now, the person next door to you might say, I love sitting in my conservatory. The person next door to them might say, the neighbours are amazing. The person next door to them go, well, I'm thinking about moving. I don't particularly like the neighbours.
Yeah.
And so...
Same street.
Different perceptions. So it's respecting their thoughts, feelings, beliefs and values of where they are right now and what's led them to this far down their own yellow brick road.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
Cool.
Second one is that...
So presupposition number 2.
Number 2. We need like a little trailer in there.
Nah, I'm going to have
like
to edit that one.
Like the Top of the Pops
No,
stuff.
you know, you don't do all the editing. I'm not saying that from a laziness, but that's a mission.
There's 14 of them.
Yes.
So behaviour and change are...
I'll tell you why I'm not going to do that. It's because when you go and find all the sound clips, most sound clips only ever go up to 10.
Oh,
and
really?
we got 14 of them. That was my initial
thought. It would be
thought.
10 plus 1.
Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah, completely.
Okay, so this is about context, ecology and environment. And this is presupposition number 2 is that change is only true and sustainable if all the environmental conditions support it.
This is incredible.
Yeah.
This is so important. So behaviour and change are to be evaluated in terms of context and ecology. So we're talking about the environment here. So if I want, or my client wants to, more importantly, if my client wants to lose weight, then the environment must identify and support that. And the moment it doesn't, okay, we are breaking the Colosseum pillars.
Yeah, and
they are breaking this. So I'm mixing up. I don't mean to add blame here because it's not about that.
Yeah, this reminds me of the context that you are the average of the 5 people
That's
that you
a great
spend the
approach,
most
yes.
amount of time
I
with.
like that.
So if you take from a weight point of view, if you take your weight is the average of the 5 people you have the most proximity with, they're your support network, they're your environment that you are around. The same for your income, the same for your values and your beliefs. You become the average of those you spend time with. So if you then want to make a change, but your environment stays exactly the same, it's going to be really hard to break away from that law of averages without being sucked back to the average.
Which is why I really liked, I've run a boot camp with, 100 plus, 110, 120, 130 plus guys in at any one time. And although they all say start in an inactive sedentary state that all want to lose weight, they're all after the same goal and they're all towards goal orientation.
Yeah.
And so the setup is all about, can I build rapport with a client? Let's do a consultation and be curious before we get into the boot camp.
Yeah.
And then everybody that gets invited into the boot camp is all goal orientated, is all a towards person.
And they change their behaviours together.
But then they're all in the same group, and it's that group environment that drives this presupposition.
It starts to outweigh the proximity, doesn't it? Because rather than the proximity that they just say have at work or at home, they now have like-minded people that are all making the same changes that can support the ecology of the change.
Which is why I'm a big fan of even a new FITPRO is to work on a signature package, because that one signature package that you work with just one type of person. And Hayley's used this analogy before, where you have a dartboard, and in the middle of a dartboard is your ideal client. Now your ideal client might be, say, I don't know, post-pregnancy. Let's say a year after giving birth, but then the outer rings could also just be ladies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
That have yet to give birth, but it doesn't mean you can't work with ladies. But your ideal client would be that middle bullseye. Yeah. Now, if you just put all of those types of people together, you've just hit presupposition number 2, which is all about sustainable, as in the environment needs to be consistent with the goal in mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Now, the moment you've got a guy in there, okay,
different problems.
You've got different problems,
different behaviours.
There we go. So the next one.
The next one, third presupposition is that resistance in a client is a sign of lack of rapport.
Oh.
So rapport was one of our pillars. We've talked about it countless amount of times. But when you get those clients that spark up an excuse or a reason or a resistance to change, and they're actually kind of battling your suggestions and everything you say might be wrong, that's resistance.
This goes with pillar number 4, which was behavioural flexibility. So there are no resistant clients. There's only inflexible communicators.
Oh, I love that. Where did you get that from?
So
That's
there are no
awesome.
resistant clients. There's only inflexible communicators. So if we're looking at behavioural flexibility, it's not just from the client side, but it's from our side.
I love that.
I've got really strong opinions of everything. I'm allowed those. Literally everything we've all got a strong opinion about. Like Hayley's drinking squash now. I've got an opinion of how strong the squash could be versus Hayley.
I like it a little bit weaker than you.
If we talk about calories, I've got a very strong opinion of those. If we talk about anything inside our world, we've got strong opinions and beliefs. Now, if I want to work with a client and bring about behaviour change, I've got to have huge flexibility. Okay, to know what I know to be true, but to be flexible enough to go either side of that black and white and see all of the possible colours of a rainbow in between, not just for greys, and go, well, I'm here to listen. Because there aren't...
And be curious.
Because I can't be curious if I'm just set in my ways.
Yeah, nice. Okay. And actually your resistance creates their resistance. So if your rapport is open and curious, then that will allow them to be open and curious to being flexible on their different behaviours they choose.
There we go.
I think that's really impressive.
Presupposition number 4. We're on number 4.
We are.
Which is people are not their behaviours.
I think this is really cool because if you look at the CBT model, in that you turn around and you go, right, so we have a situation, then there was a thought that created emotions, behaviours, and our physical changes that happen in our body. So you basically have this sort of idea that the behaviours define us as such, or they are a result of the thoughts and the feelings that we have. But here they're saying the behaviours are something we do, but they don't define us. They are not actually us.
Perfect. So I've got some notes here, so I'm just going to read off screen. So if I'm not looking at the camera, I apologise to all the YouTubers. Okay. Do you know, it's amazing the amount of comments we get. Again, it's everyone's map of the world.
If they don't like when we look around.
When we look around. So it's just me looking at my notes.
And I'll just look around the screen.
Yeah, there we go. So number 4, presupposition. The behaviour a person is acting out is not the person itself, but the person's response to something in their world. What NLP seeks to do, so Neuro-Linguistic Programming seeks to do, is to be able to enable the person to have more choice in terms of their behaviour and their response, which comes back to behavioural flexibility.
I also like the phrase there, accept the person and change the behaviour.
Completely.
So they are not the same person. It's not that when somebody changes a behaviour, they're changing themselves.
Yes.
Their whole identity doesn't change. They're still them. They just change the behaviours they do.
Which is a big key thing, isn't it? Because I've had many clients that have had, incredible results, and most of my career has been around weight loss, mainly within guys. And yet they've got to a certain point where they perhaps haven't achieved their ultimate goal, but then they've been sabotaged by a family member because they've come back and said that they're changing.
Yeah.
That they're somebody new, that they're somebody different.
You're not who you used to be.
You're not who you used
You
to
never
be.
would have done that.
And this is where that conversation comes in, because it's accept the person, change the behaviour. They're still the same person.
Yes. Yeah.
They're still the same person. They've just changed their behaviours.
Perfect.
And it's a perception. It's what we talked about last week about sitting on the sofa, isn't it? If I look at one side of a sofa, how I'm sitting, I see one viewpoint, and my senses for interpret that information. But if I step to the side, I see a totally different angle from a sagittal plane.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I love that. Yeah, love that. So people are not their behaviours.
So number 5 of 14 is everyone is doing the best they can with the resources they have available.
What I love about this is it's basically saying you might not see the behaviours or the language that somebody uses as good or the best they could do or with the best intent, but just know they've done it with the best intent possible. Nobody actively goes out to do something with a poor intent.
Yeah, I genuinely believe everybody has a good intention for every thought, feeling, emotion, behaviour they do. They have. There's always a good intention behind it.
Yeah, whether that's for their own benefit or for others, it doesn't matter.
Completely.
There is a good intention.
There is a good intention, hence why they acted that out. Completely. So we can only do what we can do, right? The client can only do what they can do with the resources they have. So we don't, again, it's a bit of lots of like Jack Sparrow moment comments, really, isn't it?
Loads of them.
Loads of them. It's like, we don't know what we don't know. So if your client is stuck, they don't know what they don't know. They haven't got the resources to ask a better, world-class, curious question.
Yeah.
That's where you come in, to ask a curious question for them to go, I didn't know that. Now I know what I know. I can either be naive to that information and stick my head in the stand.
Yeah.
Okay. Or I can now act upon that information and
make a change. Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of the trans-theoretical model, where you've got that pre-contemplation and then into contemplation, where in pre-contemplation they have no idea. They'd have no idea that change would even be good for them. Whereas once they hit contemplation, they've then gone,
It's quite strange, actually, isn't it? Like, it just got me thinking that on the first day of a gym course, and actually this weekend we got our first gym course, kind of,
so
for
excited.
Those of you that are listening, many years in the future, we had this thing called coronavirus. and the world got locked down and shut down and we weren't allowed out. But now we're allowed out, we're going back in the classroom. And on the first day of a gym course, one of the things we always talk about is like, what makes an outstanding FITPRO?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have people in the class that have done their yoga, done their Pilates as well, and they've done other elements of fitness, but this is a gym course. And we say, like, what makes an outstanding FITPRO? And the first thing that comes to mind is, like, is someone's soft skills of, like, building rapport, being non-judgmental, and developing those.
They're always the things that people say, aren't they? Like, you'd want to be supportive, you want to have open
Completely,
body language, you want to be welcoming, you want to be
But my question
encouraging.
is are FITPROs actually doing that?
Oh.
It sounds quite a harsh
So we all see them as the values associated
we see them as
to an
the
outstanding
values, but are we
FITPRO?
acting upon our values and doing what we said we were going to do, which actually is the first 2 or 3 of these presuppositions.
So even at the beginning, when we didn't have many resources, at the very beginning of our level 2 gym journey, before we knew as much as we know now as FITPROs, you turn around and go, this is what I perceive would be a really good FITPRO. And even at that point, are you now using that information now to do the best you can?
Because it's easy to say that we are, and I'm going to be welcoming, I'm going to be non-judgmental. But actually when I sit down and do a consultation, am I presenting these soft skills and actualizing them? Am I behaving like them? Am I thinking about them? Active? Because remember, we said we're not our thoughts, but if we modeled behavior and we said actually that was a well executed, this person executed a consultation very well, and we went back and we reverse engineered to what their thought processes were, am I doing those similar thought processes to get to the well executed outcome?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I love that. I think that's fantastic.
Because the client only knows the client doesn't know what they don't know.
Oh, we do.
So the client could sit there and go, right, you know, I'm in a pickle with my food, and they talk about, you know, what they have on an average day, and they say, well, they have a meal deal for lunch. They have a BLT, bacon, lettuce, tomato, can of Diet Zero Coke, and a bag of crisps every day. Now I could look at that and go, that's horrendous. That's really unhealthy. That's poor processed food choice. Yeah. Well, actually, if I go back to this, I could ask a very curious question, build even greater rapport, have sensory acuity, the goal in mind, and then be flexible on the behaviour for the client and for me.
Yeah. That flexibility behaviour might mean that it's not bad to have that meal deal.
Yeah, completely. But the client doesn't know what they don't know. They're only doing what they know to be true with the resources they have available to themselves.
I think that sums it up lovely.
Cool.
I like that.
So, which leads really nicely onto presupposition number 6 of 14, which is calibrate on behaviour.
And that makes sense because everything we're talking about is about behaviour change. But it's basically hinged on the fact that the only thing we can see and tangibly measure is someone's behaviour and their language that they speak, which is part of behaviours. We can't see their thoughts. We can't.
We're not mind readers?
We're not mind readers.
We can't get inside somebody else's head and go, that's a great thought.
So your client might turn around and go, this is what I really want. And they're saying, like, this is what I really want, and they're thinking this is what I really want, but their behaviours show something else.
Which is what I was just saying about the FITPRO. We say that we're going to be non-judgmental, but are we being non-judgmental? Yeah.
And then it literally unfolds that the behaviours don't match up with the thing that they're saying they want, and at that point you calibrate on the behaviour you see, not on the things that they're talking that they want. Calibrate on behaviours.
I think
that's a quick sum of that one.
I think you've just hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
That was like, you know, when you put a nail on the wall and you hit it, and sometimes you have to hit it like 3 or 4 times to get it
I
in.
always miss.
But you just went,
I'm not allowed.
Bam, and just put a nail in, like first hit completely.
But anything to do with hammers, like, not a good thing.
That's true.
I just don't touch them.
But just to recap on that, like, just that last bit I think was key. Just recap it.
Oh God.
Try if you can.
That we can't see someone's thought processes, but we can see their behaviours. Therefore, we must calibrate, i.e. sync up based on the behaviours they're presenting, the things they're actually doing or have done.
Because the behaviours provide an objective view of the world.
Yeah.
Whereas everything else is subjective and not true, not real. We can't see it, we can't taste the thought, we can't smell the thought, we can't touch the thought, but we can see the outcome of the actual behaviour. So we calibrate on the behaviour.
When the behaviour's changed, they've achieved behavioural change.
Completely, which would suggest that if someone has changed their behaviour of what we actually see, then their thought processes behind it must have also changed.
Yeah.
And what James Clear says in Atomic Habits is that the first time you try something is like the catalyst towards the new habit and behaviour. The second time the action you do it, the next day or soon after, it starts to become a habit. So the first time you mess up would be a fail, which was your first attempt in learning. Everything after that is you're actually breaking the habit, or you're actually starting a new habit.
Yeah.
Completely.
Whereas if you give up, then it doesn't work.
So the point here is you are going to calibrate on the behaviour of a person. And earlier on, we said, just go back to my notes, we said about accepting the person, not the behaviour, wasn't it? Was that the right way around?
So people
accept
are not
the
their
person,
behaviours.
change the behaviour. Completely, people, yes, they link.
Yeah.
Which
the next one links as well.
Well, notice they all link, but presupposition number 7, so we're halfway through, is the map is not the territory. And we've already talked about the map already.
Yeah. So the words we use are not the event or the item they represent. So when we use words, it's not actually a reflection of the behaviour or the thing that has actually happened. It's not the fact part of it. The words are the drawing, when we broke down, we said what linguistic is. So you've got neuro, then you've got linguistic. That's the pictures, the words, the things that you use to describe what's going on. So it's not the actual fact or event of me holding those flowers and sensing them. It's my description of them becomes the linguistic. So the words are not the event. And that's what's really interesting with the map is not the territory. I said earlier, if you were to draw a map of your street,
yes,
you would draw something to the 5-year-old, and then you go on Google Earth and it looks different again. The maps are totally different, but the territory is the same.
So people respond to their experiences, not the reality itself.
Yeah.
And so when you're sitting inside a consultation and your client is talking to you, which would be the linguistic, which would be their interpretation, their description, their perception, their beliefs, their values, their priorities, how they're communicating what they believed to be true. But that doesn't necessarily, because if you were there with them on that day, okay, let's just take the person that's struggling to buy healthy food inside Tesco's or Sainsbury's or any other fast food memory shop, whatever.
Other stores are
available. You could have seen the map of the world totally different. Your interpretation of the world, standing right next to them, could be like, well, there's the healthy option, there's the healthy option, there's the healthy option. That's not expensive, that's not expensive, and that's not expensive. But they saw it as their response to the experience was not the reality that you perhaps perceived. And they would have gone, well, that's expensive, that's unhealthy, that's expensive, I'm not sure, I'm confused.
Yeah.
Remember, we only know what we know.
Yeah, I like that. So the map is not the territory. Just because that's what we define it as or we express it as doesn't mean that is the truth.
And so we're reacting to this in terms of through our 5 senses. So we have our touch, our taste, our smell, our sight, and our
what else do we miss out? Yeah.
Audio.
Yeah.
There we go. I think that's all of them. And so that helps define what we believe to be true and our filter system. So we're filtering all this information all the time based on what we know to be true from previous experiences. And so think about it like this, like everything we've experienced to date in our world, for me, the last, 37 years, okay, I can only pluck out key or some memories, and those memories again are my interpretation of my map of a world.
Yeah.
And that was not necessarily the reality to be true. It was my subjective opinion of an objective reality.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And so I'm now looking at something in Tesco's or Sainsbury's, and I'm coming to a conclusion that could be expensive or inexpensive or healthy or unhealthy or not ideal, or how would I cook that, based on a vast amount of memories that are formulated by what I believe to be true then or what I believe to be true now. Okay, it's a bit of a tongue twist all this, isn't it?
This is all your map, right?
It's all my map. And now I'm left with a buying decision based on potential faulty memories, faulty beliefs that were true, beliefs that have changed. And now I'm here going, well, I don't know what to do. Remember, I don't know what I don't know.
And then you've got that map of the world and you're trying to navigate the territory that you're in that supermarket. And as a result, you'll make decisions that are different to someone else.
Completely.
So if we take the physical map difference and say, right, that's of your street. If you're the 5-year-old's drawing of a street, they're going to navigate that in a different way to what you'd do if you were following Google Earth, especially when there's then a development in the fact that, let's say there's a car parked across the entire road. The 5-year-old will be like, why is that in my way? That's not on my map. They're going to navigate around those obstacles and those barriers in a different way.
Whereas Google Earth is just going to send you on a different route altogether.
Yeah, it's already updated. Yeah.
Completely. But it's this filtering of all this information. Of what and our short-term memory is only going to go back a certain way, so our long-term memory is going to be so fragmented of beliefs and values and things that I once thought were true or still are true, and I'm filtering all this with just my 5 senses, and I'm trying to come to a conclusion, a decision of what do I do now?
Yeah,
completely.
Yeah, to navigate.
And it's our job as FITPROs to help them navigate through curious, world-class questions this complex map of a world in a very non-judgmental way, very client-centered way, and build more rapport, be very acutely aware of their language, acutely aware of how they move and what they do and what they say, how they say it, to then guide them down this yellow brick road towards the Colosseum and be very flexible on yours and theirs approach.
What I find really interesting about that one, and not to stay on this one for too long, but it reminds me so much of the ones we had previous where it was like the person is not their behaviours.
Yeah.
Because it's literally saying like, okay, they're behaving in a way based on their map of the world. It's all done with good intent.
Yes.
They are not their behaviours. And they all kind of stack up to all the other parts that we've already seen. And I like it. It brings it together for me.
Presupposition number 8 is you are in charge of your mind and therefore your results.
I like that. I like this idea of a gatekeeper to my mind.
This feels very empowering as a statement as well, doesn't it? So you could also turn it around, and I put it down as I am in charge of my mind and I am therefore in charge of my results. So a very positive affirmation.
It's a real internal locus of control on
Yes.
this as well. And then there's a difference between an internal locus of control where you're in control of your own actions and your own destiny and your own outcome, whereas an external locus of control is where it's all down to someone else. It's somebody else's or something else's reason, and fate has you on a certain path.
So like every action you take, there first must be a thought. Okay, so think about the actions you've taken this morning, what you had for breakfast. You would have had a thought that was a prerequisite to that action.
I had a different breakfast this morning.
And you might not be aware of that thought, so that could come from your conscious or unconscious state or mind. But for every action, there's a thought behind it. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so the question is, if I want to have outstanding results, then I must have outstanding thoughts that precede it.
Yeah, nice.
Precede the right word?
Yeah,
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
But
Go
before it completely. And so we've got to be, this is where the consultation is so important. It's not just a consultation for a lot of people. I think a lot of FITPROs see a consultation just for, say, one-to-one clients. Once if you put a consultation, I did for inside all of my boot camp. I used to run spinning classes. I used to put a consultation to go into the spinning class. I knew everyone was capable of going to the boot camp. I knew everybody could have their legs go round in circles for a spin class.
Yeah.
Like, that wasn't what the objective of the consultation. The goal of the consultation was to find out, who are you and how can I help you get to where you want to get to?
Nice.
So,
And that's like building a rapport as well, isn't
Completely.
it? And the curiosity and everything all
now,
stacks
if you
up.
want to get to that outcome that you want, then there must be a thought process behind it. Okay, if your thought process is, I want to come to your spin class because I want to burn 600 calories and create a calorie deficit, then maybe there's room for more coaching to guide you and say, well, actually, it's not just about creating a calorie deficit inside the one spin session you do per week.
Yeah.
What do you do for the other 167 hours and 20 minutes?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So you can use that to ask really great open questions
Completely.
and keep the changes going forward.
Because they could turn up to a spin class once a week and never get their goal. They've all got good intentions, right? They're turning up with good intentions, but they don't know what they don't know, and they're only doing with what they have available to themselves. So they've got the resources, they're just in an unresourceful state.
And what I also love about this statement in terms of understanding that you are in charge of your mind and therefore your results is that if your client is in charge of their mind and their results, you are not in charge of their results.
Yes, this is great.
But
This
you
is
can
perfect.
help facilitate to help them be in charge of their mind, make certain decisions, have certain thought processes that allow for them to make certain behaviours and get a result.
So in essence, nobody but yourself is in charge of your thoughts.
Yeah.
And your thoughts lead to your emotions of how you feel, and therefore what you feel determines how you behave, and how you behave is your reaction or response, which goes back to last week.
Yeah.
Completely. So the burden, the ownership, the responsibility, it's the responsibility for someone to respond, and their ability to respond, responsibility, okay, is the ownership is all on the client,
Yeah, it is.
not the FITPRO.
Yeah, it's not your fault if they do or don't get a result. You're not in charge of their mind. You're not in charge of their results. And you can't take over their mind.
But what I can do is influence, okay, not persuade. I think
And
that's
elicit
the difference. And
change.
elicit, I can influence and guide the client to ask curious, world-class questions that say, cool, based on that answer, here's a yellow brick, because you chose that yellow brick and it was all about frequency. So let's talk about frequency. Next question, please. Oh, we're going to go down this avenue. Cool. I happen to have a yellow brick for that as well. Now we're getting closer. It might not be the perfect straight line formula. It might zigzag towards their goal, But that's through world-class questioning of curious
Helps them
questions.
then change their mind, and they are in charge of their mind that they change and their behaviours they change.
Which leads to a client-centered approach.
Ooh, number
nine.
9. People have all the resources they need to succeed and achieve their desired outcomes. So I think this comes from a real place of abundance. What I love also, by the way, have you guys noticed that every time we read out a new point, Neale and I both have different perceptions based on our maps of the world or based on each comment. But what I love about this one is that it's really abundant in the fact that there is no lack here. So it's not a case of I can't get that result.
There's no scarcity,
because,
there's no fear.
because I don't have the time, energy, money. It's different for me. I'm a snowflake. This is all different.
I'm a unicorn that farts fairy dust.
Yeah, exactly. It turns out they actually have all the resources they need. And if you link this to the one before it, they have all the resources they need because their results are hinged on their mind, not based on the resources that they physically have.
And the one before that, which was a map of their world.
Oh, and it just keeps going.
The 7 can interchangeably work all the time, which is what I love so much about NLP. Now, this one is, there are no unresourceful people, there's only unresourceful states.
Ooh, nice. Okay. Yeah.
So all people have the ability to create whatever they want in their lives. If another person can do it, then so can you. And this is where it comes down to modelling, which was part of like Bandler and Grindler's kind of almost first approach and exploration in the 70s and 80s around NLP, around modelling and understanding if they say a certain thing or do a certain act in a certain way, then can I engineer it for me to do it as well.
It shortcuts the process to now have the same kind of outcome as that
But you can also
person
do it faster
by modelling
because now if you take the first person, let's take for example like going to space. So it took let's use
4 minute mile.
4 minute mile completely, which was, what was his name again? I can't remember his name.
Oh, Bannister?
Yeah, somebody Bannister.
Oh
yeah.
no,
There we
we're gonna get ripped for that.
Anyway, Roger Bannister. There you go. Cool. It took years and years and years, decades to get to that 4 minute mile.
Yeah.
But then the moment Roger Bannister reached 4 minute mile, I believe it was literally just a matter of weeks before the next person reached that. Because now they could model everything that he did and learn from his mistakes on what he did well and what he didn't do well, and literally copy thoughts and behaviours and actions.
Yes.
And then after that, literally it became like the time frame of which people would succeed the 4 minute mile after that became literally days, weeks, minutes, seconds. Do you know what I mean?
It's what you guys do with your clients, isn't it? You might have achieved weight loss yourself, or you've achieved weight loss with a client.
This is great, yeah. Cool.
Now, every time a new weight loss client comes to you, you can shortcut their success based on modelling of how you've got results in the past.
Of yourself, but also
or of others.
And of others.
Or of others.
Completely.
Yeah, exactly. You might not have actually lost any weight yourself.
If
That's
we
fine.
take the
But
word,
you can do it in others.
If we take the word state as well, what does that mean for you?
State, like what you're in at the moment, like your emotion, your thoughts, your impact right now.
Right? Yeah, completely. So for me, the word state would be like, so you've got gas, liquid, and solid.
Yeah,
That would be the state.
Yeah.
So they're very different, but yet they could formulate and be the same thing. Does that make sense?
Of the same ingredients.
Of the same ingredients. And so my state can change. So if we have a state within our thoughts, we have a state within our emotions, and that leads to various states of how we act and play that out.
Nice.
So if I have a sad thought, okay, that could lead to an angry emotion, which leads to a behaviour or an action that is an unhelpful or unresourceful state.
Nice.
Okay, so notice that anybody that's after something that is going towards a goal is going to have a particular state inside their thoughts, a particular state inside their emotions and how they sense and interpret the world, and therefore a particular state in terms of how they act that out.
Whew.
Boom.
I have nothing to add.
Then let's move on to number 10. We've got 4 more. So number 10, we're on number 10, aren't we?
Yes.
All procedures should increase wholeness.
Wow. And I know that you have something about this that you're definitely going to share, because it's talking about taking something that is individual parts and integrating them all together into one whole thing, one whole being.
Yeah, so it's about, I suppose, finding a label, isn't it? And, maybe there's the moment we say about labeling or categorizing could give...
They create separateness, don't they?
They create separateness, so is it good or bad? There's lots...
Healthy, unhealthy.
Unhealthy. And what I've experienced this firsthand. So let's talk a little bit about that story. So for quite a while, I had this... like
association
that money was bad. And I think a lot of FITPROs experience this notion of like asking somebody for money, having more money come towards your world. It's an odd feeling. And so there was a sticking point in terms of a growth of parallel, and it was my limiting belief around money.
Yeah.
And so I did a parts integration with a friend of mine who is an incredible NLP practitioner and hypnotist, and ultimately dug deep into the curious nature of my fragmented memories of money. Okay.
All these fragmented labeled memories.
And then take on the other side where I want to head to. So one hand is kind of where my map of the world, my beliefs, where I am right now with money, and then where I want to get to in the other hand. Now, if I keep labeling where I want to get to and what I believe to be true, I will find one label that shares the both, I suppose, the good and the bad. And now, when I parts integrate, I now have a label that represents my fragmented memories of beliefs and values of my map right now, and now and how I'm navigating the world of money and limiting beliefs versus where I want to go towards down this yellow brick road down to the Colosseum. And now I find that there's a label that is shared between the two parts, and they integrate together. And I can genuinely say from that day, from 2016, November I think it was like November the 21st or 22nd. That's how clear it is. The money limiting belief is gone. Not just gone. I know it's there. I'm not saying I don't have that limiting belief. I can't not access that state again, because I probably could. But I now know that there's a label that is shared there, and the growth of parallel is something like 360%.
Yeah. What I like about this section
purely based on my limiting belief.
Is that labels can be really useful for seeing a small thing in the same way a microscope is helpful to see something that is small, so some small detail. But with a microscope, you can't see the whole land.
Perfect.
And I really like that.
That's exactly it.
That's why you chunk up, so that you can use the right tools to look at all of it. And wherever possible in your clients, you're promoting that, looking at everything, not just one tiny little thing. You look big.
That's what the 10,000 foot view,
which is what yours was.
I remember the questions that came through, and if you were to if you were to go above that, what would you see? If you were to add a word to that, what would be above that? How do you know what I mean? So you're always going higher. So when somebody has a limiting belief, we focus on the minutia, the microscope detail.
Yeah. Rather than, and you don't want to actually focus on the detail when you can zoom out and focus on the wholeness. And
it's
that's
like an OS map and having like a 6-figure OS grid reference of like 97 something by 49 something. You're like, actually, I don't need to look at that 1 square meter on the map. I want to recognize that I have an entire map available to me. Cool.
Nice. Number 11 is there is only feedback. I love this.
There is no failure, there's only feedback. Now, I think sometimes
you should just rewind and play this on repeat. There is no failure, there is only feedback. No failure, only feedback. No failure, only feedback. Over and over and over.
So there is there's no need to label our results as failures. Now,
which is what we just said.
I think this comes down to like it's a very cliche thing to say. It's a very kind of like Instagram meme approach, isn't it? And I think maybe it's become so mainstream. It's like, it's first attempt in learning. But actually, when you break this down, we're actually saying that it's okay to fail. Yeah, even if it was so cliche, why do so many people get so caught up on not failing and want perfection?
And why is it labelled as good or bad? Like, why is failure always seen as a bad thing?
Yeah.
And not as a good thing?
My coach says to me, Neale, go and fail faster. If you want to get towards your goal, you need to go and fail faster, because the more you fail, the more you learn, the quicker you're going to get there.
So essentially, something happens, it might not go to plan, but it is just feedback of what has happened and how to do it differently next time.
It's real. Like, I don't know, is it paradoxical? Is it ironic because so many people will turn around and say like failure, oh, it's just the first attempt in learning. It's like all failures are good, you can learn from our mistakes. It's like, it's a really nice, cheesy thing to say, but the reality is, why are we all chasing perfectionism?
It's like with exams, isn't it? So many people say, I don't want to fail my exam, and yet all that is a result. It's just a number on a bit of paper at the end of it that says this is the score you got, and here's the feedback on how to do it differently next time.
Now you're
That's all it is.
getting objective data
Yeah.
that creates our reality.
Yeah.
Yet if we go back to some of the earlier presuppositions, we said that actually reality is our subjective view on an objective world. And that's the distortion here, isn't it? Because actually we live life, our reality as we know it is our subjective understanding of the world.
Yes.
Yet when you get
Fire
a
it on,
test score back, such as your level 2 anatomy or level 3 anatomy, it's now giving you an objective viewpoint of your reality.
Evaluated on fact,
which now leads to a thought, which now leads to an emotion, which now leads to a behavior. So if that test goes your way, now leads to like, oh wow, it's amazing, like I didn't think I was going to pass, I feel great, like this is just the start of my PT career or Pilates yoga career, like oh, I'm on top of the world, like it's amazing, which leads to a set of behaviours that lead you to cascade on.
Yeah, and they
So
stack up.
that was from a objective reality of your world.
Yeah, perfect.
But even then, it's still a subjective reality. If that makes sense. Anyway, moving on.
Whatever.
Cool.
And
Number
number
12
is the meaning of communication is the response you get. Yes, I like this. This reminds me of a boomerang because it's almost like the intent you put out with that boomerang comes right back to you with the response you get.
And likewise, I'd imagine if you were throwing a boomerang as a kid,
I lost a lot of them.
you lost a lot. Would be, did the boomerang come back? Did you have the intention for the boomerang to come back to you?
But in throwing the boomerang, it's all about your intent matters just as much as the response.
Yes.
So like with social media, for example, your intention is worth just as much, if not more, than the fact of whether you get a reaction from somebody with likes and comments.
Well, you wouldn't want to measure it on someone liking, commenting or sharing because your intention wasn't to get a like, comment or share. Your intention was to put valuable information out into the world.
And to communicate
and
it.
to communicate.
So
Fantastic.
the intention is just as important.
My question would be is like, the intention of every bit of communication you have, the intention to plan your consultations,
Yeah.
the intention to guide a client down that yellow brick road, the intention to have curiosity,
Yeah.
the intention to find out more about the client, the intention to build rapport, the intention for you to be goal orientated, the intention for you to be flexible on your behaviour.
And the more intent that you have when you approach a communication like that, if they come back with the same, then by you being open-minded and curious, they are now being open-minded and curious about their beliefs and how they move forward.
So it's led by intention.
Yeah.
Which, remember we said earlier that for every behaviour, what precedes that, or what goes before that is a thought. So what you could say is what goes before the thought is or level pegging is the intention.
Yeah, nice.
So
Yeah.
what do I intend to happen leads to a thought, and that thought leads to a particular set of habits or behaviours, and it plays out from there.
Perfect. Lovely.
Number 13
is a bit of a mouthful.
is the law of requisite
variety.
There we go. So what we're talking about here is about being incredibly flexible.
So we're talking about that
Not
final...
literally like PNS.
We're talking about that final bit of the pillars that we had, whereby you had flexible behaviour. That flexible behaviour, the more flexible you can be in your behaviours, then the more likely it is that you can take greater opportunities.
You've got this
life.
really good analogy of the castle, actually. I think this works nicely
yeah, it
here.
does.
So I'll let you talk about it because it's like your analogy.
My analogy.
Yeah.
If you think that when you're first born, you're born into a castle and you've got access to every single room in that castle. As the princess or prince of that castle, you've got access to every single room.
Could be born a king or a queen.
True.
There we go. But you could have infinite number of rooms as well, couldn't you?
Loads of rooms, and you can go in and out of every single room all the time. Now, as we get older, we start, or we go through life and we create experiences, we start locking some of the rooms in the castle, so that we start becoming more and more confined to, say, 1 or 2 rooms and down to less rooms.
So what we're
now,
saying,
each
can I jump in?
room is...
Well, the entire castle is the map.
Yes.
And then what you're doing is you're actually closing off boundaries and saying, I can't go into that room, I can't access that part of the map because I don't believe it to be true.
You set rules.
You set rules, you set beliefs, you set values that say, I can't open that room. So an example of that would be like when you're born, you don't know the difference between is there ghosts or no ghosts.
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you
to talk to strangers or people you know or anything.
Whatever it might be, but let's just go on like the ghosts would be like, cool, so there's a room that says ghosts. You could walk in there and you could see ghosts. But then through all of your experiences with significant people around you, they say, don't be silly, there's no such thing as ghosts. And now you close that door off and now you don't see ghosts.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, you literally close it. It reminds me also is when I started to like cut out lots of foods that I was really intolerant to. And I was really strict about it. I was like, I'm not having wheat, I'm not having dairy, and I literally cut off all these different things. And I was also like, and I can't have that, and I can't have these foods before I run.
Up all these doors.
And I literally restricted all my options. So I had really inflexible behaviour, and it meant that I couldn't go out and eat with people, that I couldn't kind of go out and have the social side of it, and it impacted so that I was basically living in one little room of my food castle.
And the rules become so restricting
Yeah.
that there's no flexible behaviours that allow for
Any other opportunity. Yeah.
Completely.
And it wasn't fun.
So presupposition number 13 is this law of requisite variety, that basically is saying if you have boundaries, you're restricting yourself, and being open and flexible simply creates more choices in life.
Nice.
Okay. Now there's certain places where you go, actually, this person legitimately has a food intolerance, or this person legitimately can't eat this.
Definitely.
Now,
but is there still ways to be flexible in that behaviour?
Perfect.
Yes.
So,
which links lovely to the final one.
Final presupposition number 14 is all procedures should be designed to increase choice.
There you go. You want to increase as much as possible, like what we said about chunking up to the whole and seeing it as this holistic thing wherever possible. You also want to make sure that you're influencing your client not to narrow down their choices to 1 room or 2 rooms, but actually that they're increasing. Is there any way they can open up more doors, or that they can build an extension on their castle?
Yeah, completely.
How can they open up more choices?
So you're born into a castle with infinite number of rooms, and as you grow up through your life experiences, and then as you're older, you then recall and reminisce your fragmented memories of what you appeared to believe or what you thought you once believed, and all these doors are all jumbled up and different rooms and all locked up. But it doesn't say going forwards, going towards my goal, I can't go and explore these rooms and say, well, actually, I've not been in this room for a while, could I go in this room? Because
it's open, I could just have a look around.
The more choices you have, the freer you are and more influence you have.
I like that.
Because if you're going after your goal, just being more open towards life, saying, well, actually, I believe that to be true, but could I find reasons for me to challenge that? Not to say it's not true, but could I just challenge the boundary? Can I just put, not saying to the client, right, you're now going to believe this and you're going to open up the door and jump in 2 feet and dance around the room. You might just say, well, how about we just put the key in the keyhole and twist it to start off with? What does that?
Don't even need to open the door.
Don't even need to open the door. How does that feel?
What if I just dust off the door so I know it's there?
Completely.
Yeah.
What thoughts, feelings and emotions conjure up now? Okay, wow, now you're going to be curious. You're curious, you've dusted off the door. Oh, wow, the door's actually quite a nice door. Okay, cool.
If I think about my outcome and my goal, and I'm outcome orientated, will it benefit me to just open this door and have a look?
Cool. Could I just peek through the keyhole and have a look? Oh wow, I didn't imagine that to be there.
Maybe I could be aware of my senses when I walk into the room and just kind of have a think about how that feels and what impact do I have.
Maybe you could go in first and tell me what it's like. Do you know what I mean? There's lots of, it's just being I suppose playful and fun with it as well.
Yeah, I like that.
So there's 14 presuppositions, and that was our approach, our interpretation. I suppose it's not live, it's recorded, but off the cuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So whilst we had notes, it was still it's still our interpretation of it. What I'd really like to know is, what have you taken from today's approach or introduction to NLP, of understanding that there's a map, that our perception, our beliefs, our values of how we interpret this map are our own, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But how have you interpreted today?
I would love to
What
hear
was
that.
your map of today's session?
Yeah.
Drop a comment inside the Inner Circle for Facebook group. If you're new to that or you're not inside our Facebook Inner Circle, there'll be a link somewhere around this video, depending on, or audio clip, MP3, yada, yada, yada,
Podcast.
There we go, got that in the end, to come and join the group.
And if you haven't already left us an iTunes review, so a 5-star review on iTunes, and you're listening on
That's
iTunes,
important, actually,
click the
because
link.
that's the stuff that drives this podcast. As you know, this is a free podcast. We're not sponsored by anything, as many other podcasts are. It relies solely on your kind of organic sharing.
Yeah.
So that could be a 5-star review. That could be on your social media socials, on your stories. Just tagging us in creates more reach.
Yeah, perfect.
So if you've enjoyed today and you're enjoying this Season 8 Behaviour Change series, definitely help us push it. Now, this is episode 8 of 8. Next week, we will be back for episode 9 of 8. And
Why not?
potentially the following week for episode 10 of 8, which will be a strange
keeping our
one.
options open.
We're keeping our options open.
Yeah.
We're opening up Newcastle rooms.
Yeah, exactly. I like that.
We will see you next week. See you later.
So.
Hi, I'm Neil Bergman.
And I'm Hayley Bergman. Over the last 10 years, we've helped thousands of fitness professionals to get qualified, learn with simplicity, and coach clients with confidence.
We're the first to say that learning and being a FITPRO doesn't have to be hard work, and that with the right structure, support and resources, you can become a confident and knowledgeable fitness professional that is dedicated to more.
So how do you learn, qualify and kickstart as a FITPRO? This is the FITPRO Session Podcast with Parallel Coaching.